Welcome to the deep dive. So every year, millions of Americans, well, they think about going abroad for medical stuff, procedures, treatments.
Right.
Why do they do it? And maybe more importantly, what are the risks involved?
Big questions.
Definitely. So today we're diving into that. We're looking at insights from a Good Morning America segment. It had a really powerful personal story. Also data from the CDC and some analysis from the Journal of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons.
Yeah, it's this whole thing called medical tourism. And the main reason it comes through really clearly in these sources, it's cost, saving money.
Yeah, seems obvious when you say it.
The Journal of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, for instance, they point out cosmetic surgery. Like, it could be up to 50% cheaper in some developing countries compared to here in the U.S.
50%, wow, that's a huge difference.
It really is.
Let's put a number on that, like from the GMA piece. They mentioned a tummy tuck, right?
Yeah.
Could be around $8,000 here,
Yeah, something like that.
but maybe $4,500 in Mexico. That was back in 2017, but still.
Exactly. A big potential saving. And the CDC data, it shows it's not just cosmetic stuff people are going for.
Right. What else?
Well, according to the CDC, it's a whole range. Dental work is huge, major surgeries, fertility treatments, even things like organ transplants sometimes.
Okay. And where are people typically going? The sources mention specific places?
Yeah, common spots highlighted are Mexico, definitely Canada too,
Yeah.
then countries in Central and South America and the Caribbean.
So, okay, the money side is, well, it's clearly very appealing. Can't deny that. But this is where our deep dive really gets important, looking at these sources together, because while the savings are there, that GMA story, the CDC info, the journal analysis, they all really hammer home some serious, potentially like life-altering risks.
This is absolutely the core issue you have to consider. The sources just keep pointing this out. The standards you kind of take for granted in the U.S.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like how doctors are credentialed. Is the surgeon board certified? How strict are the safety rules at the clinic or hospital? Especially, if you need general anesthesia, those standards, that level of oversight, it might just not be the same elsewhere, or maybe not as rigorously enforced.
And that GMA segment, it shared this really harrowing story, Shannon Palmer. It just makes those risks feel very real.
Yeah, absolutely.
She went to Mexico for cosmetic surgery, a mommy makeover, tummy tuck. But the problem wasn't even the surgery itself, was it?
No, that's the shocking part of her story they highlighted.
Yeah.
She apparently woke up with just excruciating pain in her hands.
Her hands. What happened?
Well, she learned that heated saline bags, which were meant to keep her warm during the operation, had actually caused severe burns, third-degree burns on her hands.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And the consequences they described were just devastating. Permanent disfigurement, nerve damage, and they even mentioned the potential need to amputate her dominant thumb. It's just a really stark, direct example from the sources of how things can go terribly wrong, potentially linked to those differing standards or maybe just critical errors.
And her experience, along with what the experts in these sources are saying, it points to another really critical difference.
Yeah.
What happens if something goes wrong? Recourse, right?
Exactly. Here in the U.S., if there's a complication, if there's maybe malpractice, you generally have legal paths you can take abroad. Your options for getting support, for fixing the problem, or, pursuing legal action. They're often severely limited, sometimes just non-existent.
So it's this direct trade-off then, looking across the sources.
Pretty much. On one hand, yes, real significant money savings are possible. You can see the appeal.
But on the other,
You face these potential serious medical complications. The CDC mentions things like infections, problems with implants, issues getting proper follow-up care, all stemming from potentially different standards.
Wow.
And crucially, very limited support or legal options if things go sideways.
So if we boil it down, based just on what these sources are telling us, the main warning is really clear. Medical tourism, yes, it offers those tempting cost savings, but it absolutely comes with significant risks. Standards for, well, everything, doctor qualifications, facility safety, they might be drastically different.
Right. Yeah.
And if a complication happens, your ability to get help, to seek any kind of legal remedy, it's just much, much harder than if you had stayed in the U.S.
Yeah.
And Shannon Palmer's story, it's just such a vivid, tough example of the severe outcomes that can happen when things go wrong outside the U.S. medical system structure.
Understanding those potential risks, really understanding them fully, is just so essential before anyone even thinks about making that kind of decision.
So thinking about everything, these sources highlight the potential savings versus these really substantial risks, especially around, regulatory standards and having legal options. How do you weigh the value of those safeguards when you think about healthcare? Something to consider. Thanks for taking this deep dive with